All right, guys, we're live. Welcome, everybody, to another weekly show. Um, we are here with Cody, Nick, Lisa, and my lovely wife, who is the floating voice off screen, Lindsay. She is here with us today.
Hey, good to
And
be back again.
how is
But
everybody today?
I'm pretty good. How's everybody else? Lisa, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, for
Yes.
sure. Thank you for having me. So excited.
yeah,
Well,
so far
yeah.
so good. I just finished breakfast and had to go to the post office and wait like forever to try to realize that there weren't any packages ready for me. So,
Oh no.
yeah,
Oh no.
no,
Only we
pancakes
could
made it
beam them
better.
to you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's this weird thing going on. The My apartment's post office box is somehow inaccessible, so I actively have to drive to the post office, which was like a 15-minute drive out
Oh
to
wow.
pick up leftover mail.
Mm.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I just got a job at the post office. Yay.
Ah, congratulations.
Yeah. I'm going to be a mail carrier. So
Uh,
a postman. But anyway, we are here today continuing our 1982 series, the summer of 82,
yes.
talking about all the awesome movies that were released that year. A big, like Nick said earlier, a huge year for sci-fi and some great fantasy, just great movies all around. But we're talking Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan,
The big one.
the big one. And I was, before I forget this, I was talking to Cody and Lisa earlier, and I was talking about how this is really um, a great example of how to revamp a franchise. Now, I'm not throwing shade at all at the motion picture. It is an acquired taste. Like me, I'm a huge fan because I love all Trek, but it did not do so well. It is an acquired taste. It is a slower film. But then we get the Wrath of Khan, which is just utterly amazing.
I think a lot of that has to do with the involvement of producer Harv Bennett and director Nicholas Meyer. Those two
Yes.
have, um, well, first of all, Harv Bennett has a whole lot of had a whole lot of TV experience. I think he passed away some years ago.
Mhm.
He produced the Mod Squad. That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But also, the reason Paramount brought him on was he knew how to stay within a budget because TMP like went over budget like three different times.
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
it showed. It showed the special effects on TMP were. I'm pretty sure they were phenomenal in 1979, but I mean they're not too shabby today.
I was gonna
And
say
Even
that 4K restoration that looks amazing, but the over budget, probably that's what happens when you get a director like Robert Wise of his caliber, who directed some of the biggest movie musicals, not to mention some other landmark films. That's gonna happen.
okay, yeah. I mean, and also TMP, while it wasn't very liked, it did make money. So, Paramount knew that they had something on their hands.
right.
So I think you put it. You mentioned this earlier, either last week or weeks before, Nick, that this kind of saved the franchise in a lot of ways because of how big of a hit it was critically and commercially.
Oh,
And all
absolutely.
and also kind of funny, we also mentioned that, they're always trying to chase back the success of this movie. Like, even though this
Ooh,
movie's
yes.
kind of a Moby Dick parallel, this film has become the white whale
Let's
for the
let's put a
Star Trek
pin
franchise.
let's put a pin on that. And yeah, that is definitely something I want to discuss. But I like to go. I definitely want to go into the impact. Yeah, it definitely saved the franchise in more ways than one. I mean, it was, of course, it had a whole lot of action. I mean, to this day, it's like up until the reboots, it was the only Star Trek movie where ships' phasers were used.
Well,
But
let's look at it. You have Kirk dealing with his age.
yeah,
You have which beautifully plays into this whole subplot. If you look at all the underlying plots, you have
Yeah.
Kirk dealing with his age. You have him taking on the task of taking trainees out, not an experienced crew. I mean, these are trainees on a training cruise who
yeah.
get thrown into this situation with Khan, who's, again, if
See,
you've seen Space Seed, that I could go really deep into this and I won't. But let's say if you've seen the latest season of Picard, season 2, then you will have noticed Doctor.
Yeah, they allude
You'll
to
notice Khan's
the
last name
project.
is Khan Noonien Soon. These are
Mm.
the augments that he helps create and who eventually get launched into space and cryo-freeze, and that's where Kirk, uh, in the episode Spacey, they come across him, help them out, and Khan tries to. He's slightly crazy because what they don't tell you is these augments, they're brilliant, but they eventually do kind of go crazy.
yeah, they
Even
actually
that.
touch on that on Deep Space Nine.
Yes, there are Dr. Julian
Dr. Bashir.
Bashir on DS9.
Mhm.
He has an augment.
Yeah, yeah,
They are touching on augments in the new Strange New Worlds.
Yep. Yep. Number one. I guess that's a
Number
spoiler,
one.
but
So,
if you
oh,
haven't seen it.
I'm so sorry.
I do want to see. Oh, speaking of
About that.
Strange New Worlds, have you seen the like what's the name of the actor who plays Captain Pike in that show?
Anson Mount.
Answer no.
Anson Mount. There are photos of Anson Mount as Captain Pike, but but they are using the Wrath of Khan era uniforms.
I have not seen that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I wonder if there's going to be some
It's a
time travel.
it's a revamp of it. I mean, it's not the actual
Oh, okay.
costumes because those are. I mean, they were pretty old when they were on Star Trek 6, but
They call him the Monster Maroon.
If we get a chance, I do want to talk about the design of the movie too. I don't know if
Let's
that's
do it,
Oh, yeah.
Lisa. Let's
okay.
talk
yeah,
about it.
please.
So for me, a big thing that I think, I mean, obviously the plot, the acting, the storyline is brilliant, but I also feel that Nicholas Meyer, with his attempt to change the look of Star Trek to sort of match a more nautical vibe, I think really, really worked. And I also think it's a good thing to remember when sort of breathing new life into a franchise. It's okay to update things. And sometimes it's good to have like an outsider perspective, not just sticking with, people that have always worked on Star Trek or are huge fans. Sometimes it takes somebody to come in from the outside with new ideas. And so like I could imagine a lot of fans seeing, like, let's say it was like today where you see stills ahead of time, seeing these new uniforms and no more beeps and things like that. Or there's beeps, but they've changed. It's updated. I can imagine people getting upset about that and wondering how that's going to play out. And I think it did a lot for the franchise, and I think it set the precedent for fans being more accepting of like redesigns
Well, Lisa,
Well,
sometimes.
well,
you
yeah.
mentioned the
Absolutely.
article.
Absolutely. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but Nicholas Meyer was not a Star Trek fan, right?
He
Right.
was
He
not a
went and
Star Trek
watched all
fan.
the episodes while he was trying to start the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
he
I
he
love
watched the
that
he
about
watched the
it.
whole he watched the whole series as for research because which is the sign of a good storyteller. If
Mhm.
you're going into something that you aren't really that familiar with, familiarize yourself with it. and then he saw it as essentially Horatio Hornblower in space, which is why he went with the redesigns and made it a more formal naval military look.
Well, you
Yeah, you
mentioned
were
the naval aesthetic, and if you'll notice, like with the battle sequences, especially in the Mutara Nebula, it feels like submarine warfare.
Das
Almost.
Boat in
A
space.
DOS boot, yeah,
Absolutely. And the
and
tension
again,
between the back and forth with the ships and what they're gonna do.
Yeah,
And the
that was.
bold move to kill Spock. I mean, I just don't think that if somebody's like a huge
I
fan would
they
I
got
I,
so
want that.
I want to
they,
talk about that for a
they
second.
got so many
Because
death threats and hate mail over that. It's just
yeah,
Well,
because it
it's
was
really bold. I mean, he's
Yeah,
beloved.
it's a ballsy move to be like, yeah, we're gonna kill the most beloved character
well.
on the
Here's the
show.
thing.
after
Around that time, Leonard Nimoy was sick of Spock. He
right.
wanted nothing more to do with it. The only
Harrison
reason
Ford
he
kind of.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
only reason he did TMP in the first place was to settle a lawsuit he had with Paramount. And uh, when uh, when Harv Bennett and Nicholas Meyer came to him, he said said yes, we'll give you a death scene, and he said not only does he get a great death scene, um, he he finally gets an out of this franchise, which in his eyes at the time was bringing back diminishing returns. However, uh, yes, also during yeah, and Gene Roddenberry heard they were going to kill off Spock. He got pissed and
Mhm.
leaked out that information, which forced the writers to um, rework it, because during that initial attack, that was when Spock was going to die. It was more like um, a first act turning point. Make
Mm,
you wonder who else was going to die next.
yeah.
I
Mm.
think it was after the threats and stuff where they had in the outcry where they had to go back and show you
Wha-
the coffin, the torpedo tube on the planet. So it was like, okay, guys, look, he might be dead, but here's the torpedo tube.
Well,
Don't lose it.
it wasn't
Well,
that. It was, well, first of all, Wrath of Khan was supposed to be the last Star Trek movie.
I was going to
Everybody,
say it seems like a soft exit kind of choice.
they
yeah,
were gonna just go big and go home
not,
because they didn't know if they were gonna make another one. They're like, we'll just do one and just pull out all the stops.
yeah. Well,
Right.
that's also the thing. When Nimoy was shooting the movie, he was having so much. He was enjoying his experience. He actually liked um, uh, doing it. That he started having second thoughts, and I don't know what. Um, it's like, because I don't know exactly what led to it, but you know, Harbin says, okay, well, if we make the next Star Trek movie, we'll make you director.
Hmm.
Sweeten the pot.
Yeah, uh, and that's how we ended up getting, Search for Spock and Voyage Home, and thus completing the Spock trilogy.
I mean, it's kind of crappy of Roddenberry to do what he did, but I gotta say, I think it maybe worked better because
Yeah.
the illusion that we get at the beginning of the movie when after they do the Kobayashi Maru test and
Yeah,
Kirk and Spock have that little conversation and
says, "Aren't you dead?"
Spock brings up, the needs of the many weigh out the needs of the few. That comes full circle when he decides to sacrifice himself to save the crew
Yeah.
Right.
so they can
Hon-
escape.
Honestly, I think if they went with their original idea, killing Spock as like at the end of the first act, I think it would have been a worse backlash than saving instead of saving it for the end of
Yes.
making it
Hmm.
the emotional climax of the movie. Because I mean, who all remembers Transformers the movie? And the fact that they kill off Optimus Prime in the first act, like all those kids were pissed. I think if they did something like make the death a more a larger part of a big climax sacrifice, it would have been received a little bit better. But that's a rant for another time.
And I don't know. I messaged you guys about this when I watched it again, and I don't know if it's I'm getting old and soft, or like I've experienced grief, or because Leonard Nimoy is no longer with us on the planet Earth. But man, I like tear up now every time that happens. Like that whole little exchange between him and Kirk, and even though now it's like a Christmas ornament too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's because it kind of reminds me of like the friendship between, like Frodo and Sam, right? I don't feel like we see a lot of like friendship displayed this way in film. I
No.
think usually we see romance as displayed as like
Mhm.
this deep emotional connection. But that's something that, I guess this outsider really picked up on. The friendship between Spock and Kirk is like the core of the show. It's almost like the heart of the show. So this death, it's really hard to watch because it's painful. They're such good friends, and if you're a fan of the show, they've been friends for however many years that it's been
Right.
since the original series first aired. So his death brings so much weight, and yeah, I cry when I watch it. And
I'm jumping around, but that's why I love Star Trek Five so much. Is the dynamic between the three, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And you're right; they definitely nailed that in the Wrath of Khan.
And I
The,
mean,
Yeah.
Shatner's eulogy is also just devastating, and this
Mhm.
may be William Shatner's finest performance as an
Right.
as an actor or performer
The
is
whole
in
movie,
this
I
really,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would yeah, it's definitely one of his favorites, but it's not my favorite moment in the film. My favorite is when he's alone with Carol Marcus and just lays out all his feelings on the table. It says how it's like there's a man I haven't seen in 15 years who's trying to kill me. You show me a son who'd be happy to help. It's like, how do I feel?
yeah.
It's like, oh, the funny thing is that scene took several takes, and like at first in previous takes, William Shatner was doing his normal ham thing, and Nicholas Meyer, said no, hold it back. And the only reason that take worked was because he did so many takes that it just tired. He like Shatner was literally tired that
Mhm.
that day.
Wow.
That makes
So
sense.
yeah,
'Cause it goes so big all the time. It's like
yeah,
you lose some emotional nuance. I mean, he's an older Captain Kirk. He's not the Captain Kirk from the show. He's the older version. He's the
yeah,
tired version. And I'm sure that's really uncomfortable to lean into, when that parallels real life so much, but it really works in the movie. It really works for the fans, I think.
yeah. It does.
And I like
So
that. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
I was saying, I think William Shatner was a better actor in the movies than he was on the TV show. Like
Yes.
there, I mean, there are some of my favorite. I love the original series, but there are some where I could just dunk on Shatner's acting.
Well, I mean,
Want some glaze with that ham?
you can dunk on the show, even though it's groundbreaking and revolutionary. It is of its era, and like until like HD and digital like came in to clean it up. Like I remember seeing reruns of the show on TV and seeing like the strings on the Enterprise, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of almost like the 60s Batman show. It's kind of cheesy, and that's part of its charm, but like,
Yeah,
watching it from a 50, 60 years later perspective, you can kind of be like, look how silly and cheap this show is.
Yeah, but a lot of it was poignant. Like
Oh, totally.
Did,
especially
did you guys watch the special edition or the extended version or the
I did
theatrical?
not. I just watched the theatrical cut that was streaming on Paramount.
I have actually, yeah, I have it on DVD. It's like right here. Yeah, the
Cool.
Spock trilogy.
I didn't know if you guys had caught the subplot, the underplot with Scotty and Scotty's nephew, and
Oh, I knew about that. A lot of that was I kn- I've seen a deleted scene that talked about that, and I've been told that they sometimes put that in broadcast versions.
right, and
Is that who
and
dies when they get attacked initially?
when he
Uh-huh.
brings him to the now that is the only issue I have with this entire movie, and it's not really an issue. It's just like Scotty, why didn't you take your nephew? Who that's Scotty's nephew that he's holding, by the way, when he brings that body
Okay.
up the bridge.
Yeah.
And after that, it's just kind of like, okay, he Captain gives the word, he dies. I think there's some dialogue that they cut as well, but it sets up and explains that is Scotty's nephew, and he stayed, at his post and did his job, but I never understood why he went directly to the bridge with him and not to sick bay, because you're going to the top of the ship. There's like no other route to the sick bay.
Yeah.
I
I
know
think dramatic effect of the ramifications of what just happened, I guess,
I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. No, I'm not trying to nitpick it. It was what I wondered that the other night. I was like, wait a minute, Scotty, come on, man. Why don't you just go? That's your nephew. Take him to the sick bay.
But I think you bringing up that scene with him and Carol Marcus and then the whole David character, not only does this movie play around with like Kirk struggling with his aging, because, in the TV show, young Kirk is a cowboy, shoot questions, ask questions later, go in head first. And now he's dealing with his mortality, but he's also seeing the ramifications of his womanizing, like the type of person he was as a young man. Like he has a son he didn't really know about, you know.
Yeah.
How many
I
other
think
sons does he
I
have?
want to remember what episode that was the episode where he mentioned that with Gary Mitchell. Uh, that was where Gary Mitchell was the antagonist, right? Am
I'm
I
sorry.
am
I'm
I
sorry.
off?
Which episode now?
It was uh it was the episode where Carol Marcus was, I wouldn't say alluded to. Yeah, yeah, alluded to. Like I wouldn't say introduced, but rather alluded to. Like Gary Mitchell, he was talking with Gary Mitchell, and he mentioned um, this hot little number that he almost married.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember that either, but there's so many episodes of Star Trek like
Yeah,
throughout the
it was the
years.
it was the episode with Gary Mitchell,
Okay.
which put a pin in that because we'll come back to that.
Gary Mitchell. That's who they said that when Abrams released his second Trek film,
Oh, Star Trek Into Dark. Yeah, that's what I
Into
was gonna
Darkness.
say.
That's who they
Yeah.
said that was going to be the protagonist was going to be. They kept saying Gary Mitchell, but it was to throw people off from the con rehash. Which by the way,
really, honestly, that pissed me off.
yeah,
It made a lot of fans angry.
It made a lot of fans angry,
Because
and
they
I
were
mean,
saying, they said, "Don't worry, we're not going to retread Wrath of Khan." It's like, yes, please don't. We say,
Lindsay and I we went to Jacksonville, and I was we were in costume, we were excited. We're sitting there, we're going through the movie, and I'm like, I keep looking at Lindsay, and she knows that I am one not to just really get upset during a movie. I'll finish the whole thing, but when they did the whole dying behind the glass thing, and then he screamed "Khan," I started to stand up. I was like, "This is blasphemous!" Like,
"Oh,
really?
oh,
How could
my
you do
spouse."
that?
We saw that scene. Spouse laughed their ass off because it was like by at that point Khan had become such a meme. Like,
Yeah.
just shouting
Yeah.
out Khan. And they had this really touching, moving scene between Kirk and Spock, and then they had to ruin it.
There was no weight behind that at all.
It's
It was just it was
Jay-
It's
more
out of
cringe.
character.
It was
Yeah.
J.J.
cringe.
Abrams is a good marketer of movies, but he is a shit storyteller.
I
Well,
liked the first one. I just didn't.
yeah, I
Into
enjoyed
Darkness was
09.
not good.
I
Yeah,
think
09
J.J.
was good.
Abrams is bad at follow-ups and endings. I think he's really good at setting things up.
I think he leans too hard on that mystery box level of
Oh,
storytelling
absolutely. Yeah.
until people eventually realize that he's playing with an empty hand.
Well,
It kind
okay,
of
it's
hurt
the
my
same.
feelings too that he claimed, and I remember a friend like quoting this and saying that he did like these a lot more because of that. That this isn't your grandfather's Star Trek, and I'm like, but it is though. I mean, it's literally just the original series. Like, yes,
Yeah.
there's some updates, but to say like, man, I'm revamping it, I'm updating it, I'm totally changing the game. It's like, no, it's the same.
I could have
And I
sworn he
think
said
by the
Yeah.
third one, Beyond
Like
is so
very
good
focused
because
on
it recognizes that.
Okay,
That it's
Yeah.
the
Beyond
same.
Beyond feels like an episode of the series.
Beyond
Yeah.
is the movie
Yeah.
that should have been that should have been the real follow-up to Star Trek 09, not
Yes,
Into
yes.
Darkness.
Right.
And that's okay. Yeah, taking the pin off. That's so many of these Star Trek. I mean, Wrath of Khan has been the standard by which all other Trek films have been measured, and then they try to other parts of Star Trek have tried to recapture that, and they crashed and burned. It's like they blew up worse than the Enterprise over the Genesis planet.
Right.
Look,
don't
I know
know.
there are people that enjoy that Abrams movie, but I think what doesn't work for me, and if I watched it now, I'd probably be less angry than I was when I saw it in the theaters 9 years ago. But there's no dramatic weight to the death. One, because they bring Kirk back immediately, and two, they
Right.
don't have that year of friendship. And also, when he says he's Khan, they don't know who he is. Like they're not like, oh
Yeah,
crap, it's
because it
Khan.
works with
It's a
Khan because
gotcha
they
to the
knew him.
audience.
Yeah, like he
Yeah.
was from the show, and fans could be like, "Oh, that's the bad guy from the show. Our favorite bad guy. He's back." Like that's exciting. It's like the Joker coming back or something.
Oh
But
God,
when
yeah.
but it doesn't work, and it also doesn't work because this version of Kirk and Spock we haven't known for 30 years or whatever it was at the
Right.
time. So the emotional weight of the death doesn't make sense because it feels like they just got together. They just met in the other movie and just started working together. And then one of them dies, and we're supposed to feel like that's a big deal. It's a big deal in Wrath of Khan because they've been friends for like 30 something years.
20 at that actually.
Okay, 20. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
terrible at dates. I
But
did
yeah.
not watch that math show we were
20.
talking about before we
But
started recording.
movies had a bad problem of doing this at the time, and maybe still do, because this is not too long after The Dark Knight Rises, where they're like, "Oh yeah, Marion Cotillard's not playing Talia al Ghul. She's not Talia," and then it's like, why don't you just say what you're doing, like, and trying to surprise us? Because we can read between the lines.
There
Yeah.
there is okay. There is a major difference between plot twists and shock bait.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I agree.
it's like they're just trying to catch the audience off guard. It's like, hey, did I shock you? Did I surprise you? Oh yeah, I'm such a good movie maker.
And I think the bad reception to Into Darkness it actually influenced why in Star Wars they leaked that Luke would be in it, right? Because they were like, okay, we don't want people to get really mad, and they're already guessing that Luke's going to be in the gosh, what's the name of the first one?
The Force
Was it
Awakens.
The Force Awakens. And so they're like, so he's going to be at the very end, but we have to like admit that he's in it because of how mad people got about, into darkness. It
I-
just
I-
was like
I
fans
think-
get too angry. We got to just kind of be honest this time.
I think what happened to JJ is the same thing that happened to M. Night Shyamalan. Is their first couple of movies got praised so much, and they got patted on the back so much that their egos just kind of
They bought into their own hype.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you'll notice, after their first few movies, they do start to suffer and start to lack because they feed into their own BS, I guess, their own.
Yeah. It's
legend.
their egos are fed and they buy into their own hype to the point to where their work starts showing diminishing returns.
Right.
Yeah, and also this goes to another Star Trek movie I want to talk about that tried recapturing that Wrath of Khan magic. Star Trek Nemesis.
Yep, which doesn't work
God.
either.
Yeah.
No, we get a
'cause-
young Tom Hardy though.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know who
random.
Tom Hardy
Yeah,
was yet.
I will tell you, I understand the plot of that movie. I don't like that they killed Data. I think that was that. I always thought that was for shock value. I think Brent Spiner was going through the same thing. I think he wanted Data to die. I think at that point he was.
Yeah.
But it did. It came out. Not only that, it came out 1 week before Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. So there was no chance in hell it was ever gonna survive that. And then
at that time, it's like it was kind of, you would go to like conventions and everything was no longer centered on Star Trek anymore, and it was kind of thought of as like passé and like this is on the way out, and
it
just didn't have the energy.
It was tired because Enterprise was canceled during that time. I remember going. I held a rally in Dallas at the UPN station to try to save Enterprise. That's how big of a geek I was for Star Trek, but I probably still am. But
you had faith of the heart.
It was just tired. Yeah, I think it had been on TV for 20 plus years, and it honestly, as much as I hated it, and that stretch of time was agonizing without any Star Trek, it needed it because now we're getting some of the best Star Trek that we've seen. I'm plugging Strange New Worlds again. People, please watch that show. I like Discovery. I do.
I do too.
But Strange New Worlds is just nailing it.
Discovery's a bit too dark, I think. And I hate to say that. I love the show, but I do think it's a little too. I find myself avoiding it sometimes. I'm like, oh, okay. But if I get into it, it's very serial. I have to really pay attention. It's heavy, and so I have to really plug in. With Strange New Worlds, it's like the old show. It's like this really optimistic view of the future. And to me, at the core of Star Trek, it is an optimistic view of the future. So I'm a little bit more drawn to that version.
Right.
And let's be honest, we need a few more optimistic views of the future right now.
Yeah, that's what always sets Star Trek apart. When you compare it even to Star Wars or a lot of other science fiction that we've seen on screen is usually like a post-apocalyptic or dystopian future. The cool thing about Roddenberry's vision was that it was always this optimistic view of the future where, mankind really comes together and things change, and Starfleet is about democracy and about, diplomacy. And like, I don't know. It just, when you get too far away from that, sometimes it's a little too bleak for me. To me, that's not what Star Trek's about. I say that with love. I still really like Discovery though.
I get that.
I'm tired of entire story arcs being universe-ending stories.
Yeah, it's like, can we have some light, silly stuff in the holodeck or something?
I guess that's why we have lower decks,
Deep Space.
Right?
Yes, Deep Space Nine was actually good at that.
Yes, we got all those lounge singing episodes and stuff, baseball episodes.
Yeah, but they did have the hard-hitting the hard hitting social commentary too, which
Yes.
is also
Yeah.
which is what I wanted to lead into as well. It's like I think a lot of that, a lot of what made um, Next Generation and Deep Space Nine so good is because of writers uh, like Michael Piller and Ira Stephen Bear.
Ronald D. Moore.
Yeah,
And
those.
didn't he just kind of end up becoming a writer because he was working in the mailroom or something, and he was like, "I have a script idea for Star Trek."
I believe it's
uh,
Ronald Moore.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then went on to do the Battlestar Galactica reboot, which is just freaking
I
amazing.
think Battlestar Galactica, by the time that came out, I think audiences were really ready for that kind of hard hitting, big question asking, existential crisis sci-fi. Whereas when
Yeah,
Deep Space Nine came out, I remember people calling it Deep Sleep Nine, saying
yeah,
it's boring, it's too woke. I mean, we didn't have that term yet, but
Yeah.
complaining about
well,
its commentary on, our political activity in the Middle East and religion and all that. We weren't ready, or I was ready, but a lot of audiences
yeah.
weren't. And then
Didn't
by the time Battlestar Galactica comes out, I mean, we were like hungry for that kind of storytelling.
weren't
I'll
some
s-
people upset with Deep Space Nine because they didn't really go anywhere? They were like a space station. I remember
Yes,
some
they
That
were
was
like
the
people complaining
initial.
literally they
about
don't go
that.
anywhere, and I'm
That
like,
was
well,
the
it's about the
initial complaint
relationships.
against these. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
Oh no, you're fine. You're go ahead.
That's also I want to talk about writers like Michael Piller. I think they kept um, Rick Berman's, let's say, baser desires in check, because Rick Berman, you know, he he was a Star Trek producer who really didn't like Star Trek. Like his vision was to completely like deconstruct Star Trek. And then by the halfway around when Voyager happened, Michael Piller died, and then Rick Berman was just left alone. And then I think we, with the last part of with most of Voyager and a lot of Enterprise, is I think Rick Berman's ego going unrestrained.
Hmm.
I haven't seen enough of Enterprise or Voyager. I kind of there's nothing wrong with Voyager, but because it came out at the same time as Deep Space Nine and people had that complaint that Deep Space Nine went nowhere, I had a little bit of ill will towards Voyager. That's silly, but it was
I
Oh,
did.
so you were
I
putting your
watched the
alliance on that.
yes, I
You're
was like,
like,
no, I prefer, the adventures on Terok Nor to the Voyager ship.
right.
Funny thing is, I think I stopped watching Voyager after that episode where Warp 10 turns you into a salamander.
But I
Yeah, they
think they're probably trying to win
Voyager
people back with Voyager.
Voyager returned to that. I don't know. I mean, they had their little arcs and stuff, but they
Yeah.
kind of returned to that episodic. Some of them were real.
Kind of
I say
campy.
goofy,
Yeah.
campy. Yeah, campy. Kind of like the original series was in a way, if you could describe it like that. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a sucker for all like there are episodes in each series that I like less than I do others. So they all have their ups and they all have their downs. They can all be really hokey and cheesy, but they all have really great, optimistic underlying messages. 99% of the time. So
and I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of the franchise, and I think that's why it's endured for what, almost 60 years.
And
yeah,
counting.
Yeah. But getting back to the movie, because I know kind of when you talk Star Trek, it's a
uh,
over encompassing thing.
Yes.
Um, this had to be probably a shock to Ricardo Montalban. Hey, we want you to reprise this character you played as a one-off 20 years ago.
Right.
and by the way, people, that's his real chest. He was
Is
like,
it?
Yes.
Is
he
that
was
Yes, it is.
extremely
man?
buff.
Man, he's in shape. What was he in his 60s then, or 50s
Yeah.
at least,
I
right?
remember I remember when I saw one of his like last I saw him at a convention when he was older obviously than this, and he was like I think he was in a wheelchair. And then I
Oh.
remember the next convention that I went to, he had passed away and they did like a tribute. And that was like really emotionally heavy to me as a, because it was probably like the first like celebrity death that I felt like connected to because I liked this movie so much. That was like, sorry to go in a dark direction with that, but he looked great in this
it's
movie.
fine. Ricardo Montalban is, I mean, in a way, he's almost as hammy an actor as Shatner, but his is more refined. And yeah, that
Like
man
Shakespearean
definitely took.
almost.
Yeah, well, both of them came from the Shakespeare tradition, but yeah, Ricardo Montalban definitely he took care of his body.
Yeah.
Doesn't he quote Shakespeare in this movie?
He
I
quotes
feel
a
like
lot of
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to touch on. There are so many literary references in Wrath of Khan. Like, yeah, there's the obvious Moby Dick analog, but there's also A Tale of Two Cities,
Yep, because that's
Paradise
the book.
Lost,
Mhm.
King Lear.
Do you think
That's
that's
what he-
done to help like modern audience or audiences that are watching it that may not be huge Star Trek fans kind of understand the concepts that they're exploring? Like, I feel like that's a good way to get people that aren't like diehard fans like we are to kind of understand what's going on based on literary references that they would easily get.
Maybe. I mean, it's kind of like it's like talking about things that worked in Wrath of Khan. There's some things that worked there that actually went kind of going off into other Star Trek stuff, but they used the Moby Dick analogy in First Contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where with Captain Picard and his vendetta against the Borg, and then he quoted Moby Dick. And it even gets more meta because Patrick Stewart later on goes on to play Captain Ahab in a
Right, in a
TV
TV
version.
movie.
In
Yeah,
a
I
was
saw
TV
that.
version of
A
Moby
Yeah.
Dick.
TNT movie, I believe.
Yeah.
He's probably played King Lear too.
Oh yeah. Like Patrick Stewart is a national treasure. Let's be honest here.
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
yeah, but going back to Wrath of Khan, there are, I think the one that really gets to me that I'm thinking of at this moment is Paradise Lost, because there's that line that Khan says, "I was a prince," and it's like, and Khan was a prince who was cast down to um, from his lofty post, and so if that makes Khan Lucifer, then that would make Kirk God. Insert your Shatner ego joke here.
Yeah.
Maybe God's not out there.
But
Maybe he's right here.
I don't think I had watched a lot of the show when I saw this as a kid, and I definitely hadn't seen the Space Seed episode, but I didn't need that. Like, the subtext
Exactly.
was there, like Khan's thirst for revenge and him
That's
blaming Kirk for his spot in life and just wanting to eviscerate him and cripple him, and it
and
works. You don't need all the back. It helps, but like you don't need it. Like the movie works without having to see that.
Again, I
Yeah,
think that
that's
outsider
that is the
perspective
beauty of it.
helps.
Another reason why it works is because, and I'm sure Eagle Eye fans spotted this out, is because like when Captain Tyrell and Chekhov stumble upon the remnants of Botany Bay, and he's like, "Hey, we got to get out of here," and then they end up getting caught, and he's sitting there talking to them, and he goes, "I don't remember you, but I remember you. I never forget a face."
Okay,
Well,
I have a
Which is
nitpick
funny.
Trekkie thing
Chekhov
because I was like,
didn't
wasn't
show up.
Chekhov not introduced till season 2? And
Yeah,
then
he
he came
wasn't.
in on season 2.
There's-
This was episode 22 of season 1, so there
that's
is
what
a
I was gonna
slight.
say. So how does he remember Chekhov?
Okay,
Well,
there's a
Lindsay
story
did-
that Walter Koenig came up with. Like, do you want to tell it, Chris, or should I?
Well, I was gonna say Lindsay. What was your theory, Lindsay?
He's just lower decks. You don't see him in that episode because
Ah.
he's busy doing it.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
good one, Lindsay.
He could have
Yeah.
stopped him
He was in
there.
the lower deck. He hadn't been
Okay,
promoted
the
yet.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
here's a story that I heard from like Walter Koenig, because of course, in real life, he didn't want to be cut out the scene because of that continuity error. So he says, okay, so Chekhov was was working the lower decks, and he had a really bad case of diarrhea, and he was stuck in the bathroom, and Khan had just thawed out, and he really had to go. And then when and then when he comes out, Todd looks at him and says, "I'll never forget you."
Are you listening, Lower Decks writers? Because I think that would be a good episode.
It would be a great episode. Huh? I was in the toilet the whole time this dictator from the 20th century tried to take over our spaceship.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of Chekhov too, I was really young when I saw this movie, and I remember the earworm thing did me in.
A
dude.
literal earworm. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Did me. I screamed and cried. Seeing Chekhov and in pain was was it Scotty in the scene too? Like it's
No, it's
horrifying to me. Or who is it? Who's the other guy with
the
him?
Captain Terrell, the character
Captain Terrell,
Paul
right. Somebody
Winfield
expendable.
plays.
They did dip into the monster aspect, the alien aspect of that, or the creature feature aspect of the original series.
I demanded it be turned off, and my dad was like, "You're really that afraid of that?" And I think Chekhov looked like he was in a lot of pain to me. I was empathetic. I just couldn't handle it.
Well,
Chekhov looks like one of those large eye child paintings, like the crying children that you see in thrift stores. So it breaks your heart as soon as anything bad happens to him.
Well, his
I was like, I'm done.
schoolboy outfit that he wears in the third movie, it's like a schoolboy leisure suit. It's got the big collar, so
yeah,
he was like a likable Wesley Crusher. I'm sorry.
Oh.
That's what they were trying to do with Wesley, and it didn't work.
Okay, I do. I have my. I actually was one of those people who like Wesley Crusher as a character, but and also they going back to Deep Space Nine, I heard that Jake Sisko was more the anti Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, he was. He was like, I'm not following in my father's footsteps. And no actual shade to Wesley Crusher, because I do like him as a character. But I remember people feeling he was very annoying in TNG.
Yeah. Will
because
Wheaton
he just
is a
didn't
national
fit in.
treasure too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like Chekhov was a little bit different because he was a little bit older. He was just like the young ensign, but Wesley Crusher was like a child prodigy, and that tends to rub people the wrong way for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, but by that point, Chekhov was executive officer, though, first officer.
But he still was doe-eyed, as Lindsay said.
That scene messed me up for different reasons. When I was a baby, I had to have tubes put in my ears because I had chronic ear infections.
Ugh.
Yeah, so I sometimes still get a little bit, hinky about anything being put in my ears.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like sometimes violence or pain that is something we can actually relate to is more horrifying than like a head being chopped off or something. It's like
we
nobody
don't have
wants stuff put in their ears.
Yeah.
And like I think also like something invading your body and taking control over you is frightening,
Yes.
Right.
So just
Great
that
scene.
core concept.
Yeah.
Besides, so I don't know if you guys know this. There's a website called Vulture that they do movie news and movie reviews. They did a expansive list a couple of months ago and listed like the 101 greatest sequels. And this movie wasn't on there. They had First Contact.
What?
Oh.
But this one,
I
I'm
love
like,
First Contact, but come on, Martha Khan should be on there.
First Contact's a good movie. Jonathan Frakes is a good director. He had, of course, all the cast and crew has long since been having good. The cast and crew has long since had a good rapport with each other. But First Contact is not the best Star Trek movie. I'm sorry.
I agree. I mean, it's probably my favorite or one of my favorites, but this is like, I think culturally has more impact than.
Oh, totally.
First Contact did.
I think this is not. outside of Trek, I think this is
Yeah.
considered one of the best sci-fi movies ever made, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I always see it on lists. Like
Yeah, it's like their Empire Strikes Back kind of, if you had to compare it to Star Wars, like it's the darker, kind of has a darker ending and like has more impact on the fans, and I don't know. It should be on that list. That's surprising.
I was shocked too. I was like, I feel like and I think maybe they were like, "Ooh, look at us being edgy and not." Because I mean, true, okay, First Contact's the best next gen movie, but
For
that's
sure.
also
Yeah.
that's not a stretch.
Not a high
to-
bar, but
Yeah.
sorry. I love all of them, but yeah. I feel that the original series movies are more watchable than a lot of the TNG movies, except
For
for First
sure.
Contact.
Except
I
for
mean-
what? I'm sorry.
Except for First Contact, I think is special.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
Insurrection felt like just another episode, like a two-parter.
Exactly.
Of
It wasn't
next
bad.
gen,
It was
yeah.
just an episode. It
Yeah.
didn't have. Sometimes when they try to get you to care about, it sounds terrible, but they'll pick like some alien race and be like, "Let's care about this race you haven't heard of till this movie," and you're like, "That feels like an episode." Like
And they're humanoid and identical, so there's not
See,
really.
there's-
It's kind of
Yeah.
like what?
Yeah.
You were
I mean,
like,
they
okay.
did. They already did an episode about forced relocation, which was a Wesley Crusher episode.
Right.
The Native American tribe who settled on a planet, but then they were gonna give that planet to the Cardassians.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and that was the start of the Cardassians being one of the big villains of Star Trek.
I didn't
I mean,
realize that.
we really didn't get into what made them so bad until Deep Space Nine, but yeah, they already did it. I mean, it's Insurrection is a solid movie, but it was not where the next generation crew needed to go. I mean,
And that's a shame because it was such a groundbreaking TV show and kind of elevated the dramatic flair of where Star Trek could go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
at
It's a
that
shame
point, they
that
were
the
going through
movies-
the Dominion War.
Yeah.
It's a shame the movies didn't do as well as the original series movies did.
Yeah.
Do we think, besides the themes and the actually really good performances from both Shatner and Montalban and other people in the cast, do we think because this is such a blockbuster style movie compared to most Star Trek stories is why?
Oh, I will tell you something else too. You talking about blockbuster? That soundtrack is top notch.
Oh
That
yeah,
sounds
James Horner's
makes
score is
Yeah.
great.
movie. Yes.
Yeah, James Horner kind of knocked that out of the park.
The movie is already epic with this, just the scenes and the special effects and the ships, the action between the ships that we hadn't really seen before. But that score made it it turned it up to 11.
Yeah, I
in my
agree.
opinion.
And wasn't that James Horner's first film score? Or one of his
Uh,
first? I
I'm
know
not
it's
sure
the
if
one
it
that
was one
put
of
him
the
on the map.
Yeah, it
Because
I'm not
later
sure
on,
it was
because not
first,
even 2
but-
years later, James Cameron tapped him to do Aliens.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that
I believe we
soundtrack
had
slapped too.
yeah, I believe we had someone mention their Wrath of Khan elements in when we talked about Aliens.
Yeah. A lot of there were a whole lot of production issues, and Horner was on a deadline, so yeah, he had to cannibalize some of the leitmotifs from Wrath of Khan and put them into Aliens, but it worked.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody expected the movie to work as well as it did, but yeah, and Aliens, that's considered to this day to be the best of the whole series.
I prefer Alien. That's just me.
Me too. I slightly prefer Alien. I think they're
Slightly, yeah. I'm gonna
they're
go with
both
what you
great,
said.
and they're both kind of different style. They're almost
different
two
genres
different.
almost.
Yeah,
Well,
but
yeah, Alien was more of a horror, like, yeah, sci-fi horror, and Aliens
Thriller.
was
Mhm.
it's an action movie. It's a war
Yeah.
That's where I
movie.
get hung up. Like in my horror division, I say Alien is up there, and in my sci-fi action, Aliens is up there.
Yeah,
So
how
it's
can you
hard
not
to
put it up
it's
there?
hard to
Yeah.
pick one.
Well,
It
I
just depends on what I'm in the mood for. Like they're
I
both
think
just
someone
epic.
put it perfectly well. Ridley Scott's Alien is a haunted house, and James Cameron's Aliens is a roller coaster.
For
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
yeah.
But Cody, alluding to what you said earlier, or expanding, I guess, on what you guys have already talked about, I think the score is a big part of it. But you asked like what sets this apart, and you talked about like the sort of big budget, almost like summer movie blockbuster energy that this movie has. I think again, I keep saying it, but I think that outsider perspective, like how do we get Star Trek to a wider audience, seems to be what Nicholas Meyer was trying to do. And I think by doing that, he picked the core of what people care about with these characters and with this show, but he expanded it and he made it relatable to a much bigger audience. In a lot of different ways. And I think some of those ways was having more action, or like we were talking about earlier, just you don't have to have this long backstory with each character. You kind of understand. I think he understood that people, even if they didn't watch Star Trek, they know who Captain Kirk and Spock are, like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
what people like about them. So he just kind of expanded on that. I think sometimes people get lost in the details, like getting upset about changing their uniforms, or worrying about consistencies, and like, oh, did he meet Chekhov yet? And like this guy was like, hey, let's like not worry about that stuff. Let's focus on what people really like about Star Trek and how we can get like more people to enjoy this as well, besides just the fans. Like, how do we please everybody? And I feel like he did that really well with this movie, and it's been hard to duplicate.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
this probably was, I know like, Star Trek got canceled after 3 seasons, but then I guess reruns kept it and the fandom going, and kind of maybe created fandom in a way. But I think this
Yeah.
movie probably like got people into Star Trek. 'Cause,
Yes. And I think
It
Star
was
Trek had like their first fanzine ever. Like, is that right? Like, I've heard that like the concept of like fanzines and stuff like that was started with Star
I
Trek.
believe so. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Also, it was the two big Star Trek movies that got people into Star Trek were Wrath of Khan and Voyage Home,
right.
because
I love
Voyage
Voyage
Home
Home.
was a lot more lighthearted. It gave it gave a lot of the cast members some moments to shine, and it even without the Enterprise, it nailed what made Star Trek Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fun movie, and who's, I don't know if he's credited, but he worked on the screenplay, Nicholas
Yeah.
Meyer.
Nicholas
Oh,
Meyer
wow, okay.
So-
is credited as a screenwriter.
And I don't know how anyone else feels about Undiscovered Country, but I would
Oh,
say
that's-
it's probably the second best Star Trek movie in my mind.
Yeah,
So-
that movie is a whole nother topic, a whole nother show.
So I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe there's something with this guy working in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, he has a script concept out right now.
Yeah,
Floating around
I think
about-
Alex Kirkman approached him to write a one-off miniseries about like what Khan was doing in those 15 years stranded on Alpha City 5.
Right.
Interesting.
And they won't touch it. They won't mess with it. And it's gold. I guarantee you, with him involved, it would be excellent. And
now, speaking of Nicholas Meyer writing, a little fun fact: he has penned a couple of Sherlock Holmes books.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
one of them
'cause-
is called The 7% Solution, and
Hmm.
this also credited that line when it's like God, was that? It's like when in Star Trek 6, Spock says, "An ancestor of mine once said, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth."
Yeah.
And Spock is basically saying Sherlock Holmes is his ancestor on his mother's side, obviously.
Yeah.
Powers of
That's-
deduction. Yeah.
Which, there's a whole subplot of that in Next Gen with Data playing a
Sherlock
version of
Holmes.
Holmes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
And-
interesting. He did Sherlock Holmes novels. I haven't seen the film he did prior to this, but I know that like time after time, even though it's H.G. Wells, like has a little bit of like a Sherlockian storytelling where H.G. Wells travels through time to stop Jack the Ripper, I think is the plot of that movie.
Huh. I need to check that out, but yeah, I mean, I
That's
like to
Malcolm
see
McDowell
some of
and
his
Christopher Reeve.
non
Malcolm
Star Trek.
McDowell and David Warner.
Or
I
David
forget
Warner,
who the.
sorry. Christopher
No,
Reeve
they're
did,
both in it, and I forget. Oh, you're thinking of Somewhere in Time. with
Somewhere
Christopher
in
Reeve.
Time.
Like
I
Michael
forget.
McDowell, David Warner, both of whom were in Star Trek.
Yep. And I'm trying to think who the female lead. I think it's Mary Steenburgen, but I'm not sure.
Oh wow.
I think before we cut this conversation, I feel like we gotta talk about Dr. Bones. Maybe just because I love Dr. Bones.
Yay.
Dr. McCoy, yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Because, he's a key element in the friendships of Kirk and,
They're like the three main characters. I mean, I know like the whole cast are the main characters, but really the three central characters we care about the most are always Spock,
Oh yeah.
Bones, and Kirk. They're just a
Yeah.
trio.
Yeah, it's from what I
Again,
understand, Spock is the more logical part of thinking. McCoy is more emotional, and Kirk pretty much, brings it all in balance.
I feel like McCoy is us. That like
Yeah, he's
like,
the
He's the guy
audience.
that's like, this is not. He's always like, that's not going to work. This is not going to work. This is impossible. We're going to fail. Like he's us. Like that. If you threw me on the Enterprise, I would be
But I-
scared.
I
tell
don't
you
know
what,
if I'd be
actually,
as
it's kind of
salty
funny.
and hilarious as Bones,
I was
though.
Yeah.
told that the bigger audience surrogate on Star Trek was Lieutenant Barclay.
Next Gen, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on Next Gen, but yeah, with going to original series, yeah, he was the cantankerous. Dr. McCoy was the cantankerous old crudmudgeon who's just along for the ride.
Well, I tell you, his performance again, going back to Star Trek V, where he has to pull the plug on his father, is just awesome.
Oh yeah,
like
that was one of the few good things about that movie.
That's equal to the Kirk and Spock thing to me. Like that when they have to like face their pain and he sees his dad, laying there, and like, man, that's like award-winning stuff. That's like the best I have ever seen him act on any Star Trek.
I agree. Also, I want to give one more shout out in that movie. The Genesis sequence, like that computer anime part where they demonstrate how the Genesis planet is made.
Yes.
That was done by a graphics department at Lucasfilm, which would later become Pixar Animation Studios.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. Wasn't
I
that
did know Lucas owned Pixar and sold it. So
Yeah.
Wasn't that one of the first fully animated sequences in a movie, like computer generated sequences
Yes.
in a movie? Was that one scene?
Yes.
So pretty cool stuff.
But yeah, I feel like with the relationship between the three characters, I feel like Spock is the guy that kind of gives Kirk a deeper thinking and connection of everything, and I feel like McCoy is the one like putting him in his place. Like, you're getting old, dude. You can't do these things anymore. Come on, why do you even want to?
Well, no. That's the thing with McCoy. McCoy was saying, desk life doesn't suit you. You need to be in control of Starship. You're not as old as you think you are.
You're right.
And it has weight because he's older, right? So he's kind of
Yeah.
he's been him, in some ways. I think he can kind of give him that almost like a mentor to him at times.
And then Spock also tells him, like, you should have never taken the promotion. Captain is what you're suited for.
Yep, and after he gets demoted at the end of Star Trek 4, he stays as the captain.
I think that becomes a running theme too in a lot of the series with the captains that we grow to really love. When they start getting promoted too much, they always kind of want to return back to the captain's chair because we want them to, but also maybe this set that precedent of like
Yeah,
that
because
theme.
isn't that a Picard element too?
Mhm.
Oh
Like
yeah,
he
that
got,
was another. Speaking of promotions, at the end of Star Trek II, Sulu was supposed to have been promoted to captain at that time, but I think Shatner somehow blocked it.
oh my
gosh,
god.
he's the worst.
Yeah,
Only Nimoy could get
Shatner,
along with him.
Yeah,
Shatner
and
was
so
very.
we didn't get Captain Sulu until Star Trek VI,
Oh, that's so
which
petty.
is
That was
also
one of my favorite things about Star Trek VI was the fact that Sulu not only was a captain of his own ship, which is badass, an Excelsior class, but he also gets to fly in and save the day, and help
So
save Kirk and the Enterprise. And I always thought that was funny because of William Shatner being so, I'm going to say it, he's homophobic and he is an ass. And you're right.
Yeah.
He did have,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was
did
gonna
have an
ask, was that a
imaginary-
racist thing or a homophobic thing?
kind of two. Yeah,
Probably
two
both.
things.
But
I don't know.
you're right. He had an imaginary promotion swept under the rug because he didn't want to be overshadowed, even in
Oh
the
my
movie. In
God.
a movie,
which is
so
funny because going back to Star Trek Nemesis, it ends with Riker finally being promoted to captain.
Well, I don't think I don't know, but I haven't heard any stories of Patrick Stewart being an ass to people.
Oh no, Patrick
No,
Stewart is a national treasure.
they were like, and that cast is like so different, and they always talk about it, the whole cast, like they all got along, and I think that's different from almost any of the other Trek shows. Like they got along in a weird amount. They were in each other's weddings. They're very close, and
they're always eating dinner together, and like you see pictures of them hanging out and showing up places, and so
yeah, it's truly unique. That entire cast got along. I think that just doesn't happen very often.
I heard that
rarely.
Stewart in a documentary that I watched one time, where Stewart, when he first got in there, he was very everyone else was used to TV, and he was used to stage. Some early films, so
yeah, he was an Excalibur.
Everyone was kind of loose and kind of playing around and having to not being able to get it on one take. And they said that he could be very difficult in the beginning, but after that he was like, this is not the stage. We are in TV, and he's brought that up. The fact that they helped him realize that this was something totally different than what he had expected, and loosened up enough to where he could, they could have bloopers and play around and joke and
well, if you want to see something frightening, there's a meme or a picture of them testing a wig for him because Roddenberry didn't think a starship captain should be bald.
Oh, there are a lot of test photos of the Next Gen cast. There's one with like Geordi with a Jerry curl.
Oh God.
Oh
yeah.
I'm sure LeVar Burton was like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to stand up for myself here. Well, it's interesting because later on, Cisco, like, didn't they make him shave his head?
No. He wanted to be bald at first. He wanted to be bald from the beginning, but the producers thought it would be too intimidating.
Yeah, that was really not cool.
Like, yeah, it's like that. Bad enough we have a black man in charge of a.
Yeah, but he can't also be powerful. It's like, what?
They let him become full Hawk, like by season 3 or 4.
Yeah,
shaved head, goatee, really like badass looking. Well, but it took that long for him to be able to do that.
It just sounds so silly now, but it's weird that this wasn't that long ago.
Avery Brooks is another acting MVP. Yeah,
and activist.
Cisco.
Yeah.
Cisco was probably, I would say, my favorite captain outside of Picard.
He is another who is
He's underrated for sure.
He is underrated and probably is the most badass of all the captains.
I mean, he
right?
punched Q, so
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm really going off the rails here. But anyway,
But
Punch
is there
Q.
anything else about the Wrath of Khan we want to talk about? I mean, it's just such
Other
a
than it being a
classic.
masterpiece, I think we've
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah,
Is
it is
it all of y'all's favorite Star Trek movie, or do you have like one you're
That's
like
hard.
actually
it's really hard.
I will admit, Wrath of Khan is a very good movie. It is objectively the best made, the best paced, but my favorite Star Trek movie has to be Voyage Home.
Okay,
Okay.
you're making me feel
My
better. I
family
think
saw-
I'm in the same boat.
I was 6 years old. I saw it in the theater. My family took me to see it, and that's what finally got me into Star Trek. My mom watched it on reruns all the time. I didn't get it, and then I went to see Voyage Home, and that's what stuck it home for me.
Yeah. Star Trek 4 is just such a great.
That's probably a great introduction film because it's so lighthearted and it feels like there's no like
It was such a
connection.
break. It was such a relief. Like after to end out the Genesis trilogy that way was genius.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Because you're right,
which
it is just so lighthearted. You
I
do
think
Carol, but
I think a lot of audiences are afraid of lightheartedness.
Hmm.
They think, showing happy emotions is somehow lesser.
Yeah, it's
But
not as dramatic or not as deep.
yeah, but yeah, you had, the first one Spock dies, and the second one you lose the Enterprise, and Kirk's son is killed, and they're all fugitives. Yeah, you needed something to, you know, uh,
cleanse the palate.
you needed a break from that.
This is the Return of the Jedi version.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like it injects some. I think that formula really works. Is why I always bring up Star Wars as a trilogy. I think that idea works. You introduce something. The second one is bleak. The third one is happy again. I guess in this case the fourth one, but I
Yeah.
think that it works. If we pretend like motion picture didn't happen, it would be the third one. But
Well,
anyway.
I just saw motion picture. Here's how I see all the Star Wars movies, not Star Trek movies. Star Trek movies. You have the reunion movie,
Mm-hmm.
then you have the trilogy, and then you have two different epilogues.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The motion picture again is the closest to the original series to me.
Well, I mean, it
Yeah.
was supposed to be a backdoor pilot.
Yeah, the motion picture and Star Trek 5 are, and you know what? Thinking about it, since we just brought it up, Star Trek 4, all three of those films have really close parallels to what you would have seen in the original series.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
those
true
three
too.
movies-
People forget how light TOS was. It's like
Yeah.
they and people will say things like I was in like a chat where people were talking about, I know this is going to sound unrelated, but I promise I'll bring it back. They were talking about Picard season 2 and how things were kind of ridiculous and this wouldn't happen and that wouldn't happen. And I'm like, y'all, I know you think of Star Trek as like hard sci-fi, but I mean, remember the Voyage Home? Like
Yeah.
that's about like time travel and saving
The same
whales. Like
whale. Yeah.
it's
Surely,
Star Trek
people,
doesn't have to be that serious. Like it
Not-
doesn't. It really doesn't.
Spock's brain.
Oh God,
Season-
yeah. I was gonna
Season
mention
3
Spock's
of the
brain.
original- Season 3 of the original series turned into Creature of the Week. So
They had so many of
I
those
mean-
episodes. And what about like the music, like when they had to fight to the death? Come on, it's like silly stuff going
Oh,
on.
Yeah,
I
in
mean-
all of Star Trek. Like in TNG,
That's
there's
one of
an
my
episode
favorite-
where Oh, go ahead.
Now,
Go ahead.
one of my favorite Star Trek memes is, "Why'd you make Star Trek so political?" And they show the episode with Kirk and Spock in the Nazi outfits.
Yeah, or like
Well,
even like the fact that you know the voyage home is such a big like climate change.
right.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
it's
climate
extremely
change,
liberal. Like,
conservationism. Oh,
Uh,
mhm.
actually, that movie actually did save the humpback whale from extinction.
oh wow.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
get people to care, sometimes people don't care because they don't know about something, you know.
Also,
But when you make
Right.
when you get it out there and you make it relatable, I mean, it's almost like propaganda in a good way.
And
yeah,
thank Leonard Nimoy for that because he was heavily into Save the Whales and stuff like that. And he goes, you know what? If they're going to give me, because he was the director of Search for Spock, but the studio had their hand in it a lot, and
Mhm.
it was almost an unpleasant experience for him. But it ended up making a lot of money. So by the time that Voyage Home rolled around, they were like, "Okay, we're just going to give you control. Apparently you know what you're doing." So he was like, "Since I have control, I mean, we're it's we're gonna put whales in it." You know,
yeah,
that is a subject I'm passionate about at this time. I'm
yeah.
able to work it. It'll work because it's Star Trek, and that's what we're gonna do. And by golly, it worked.
Also, both Shatner and Nimoy were members of Greenpeace.
Oh, got it.
Makes
And I
Yeah,
sense.
feel like it's that outside of the box thinking, you know, that really helps like breathe new life into something that might be dying out. I mean, I think without those movies, like you're saying, it's kind of like the core trilogy. It really changed how people viewed Star Trek. It got a lot of people back into it. I remember my dad used to watch this movie and a lot of the older films over and over and over. And some of them I liked, some of them I didn't, but Wrath of Khan and Voyage Home were the ones that even as a kid I really connected with.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It also
Yeah.
led to that common rule of the even-numbered Star Treks being good.
I was surprised this is the first time someone brought up that rule. We
Well,
used to talk about that all the time.
I
Yeah,
like the original, the motion picture, and I like the Search for Spock.
I
So,
still like them. Yeah, I like them.
but
But
yeah,
but two,
I'm
4,
a,
and 6 are the
yeah.
the the highlights of the franchise, and
I'm a huge a proponent of Star Trek Five, and that is because Shatner wanted to direct. I think he had a really great idea, but again, the studio um, did what they did with Nimoy with Search for, and because it was his first time, they put their hand into it, and they not only that, they slashed his budget tremendously. ILM was busy with another movie, so he was not able to use ILM and had to go with another special effects company, which a
oh,
lot
I
of
didn't know
fans
that.
say hurt the film, but I didn't really see any issues in it.
Is
And
this the movie with the Klingon floating blood? Is that what you're
no,
talking
no, no.
about?
That's Star Trek
no,
Six.
that's
Oh, that's
Star
6.
Trek
Okay.
6.
this
Star
is
Trek
This,
Five
Spock's
is
brother, God.
yeah, they
yeah,
bring in
Okay, okay.
Cybok and
It's been a
and
while since I watched them.
but
Yeah.
Spock's blood.
the whole if you look at it, it dealt with religion. It dealt with the friendship between the three main characters. It was very original series. It's just everything stacked against Shatner, and he was not able to make the movie that he wanted. So that was probably it was the poorest uh, received Star Trek release probably since Nemesis. I think
Well,
those two
Yeah, I
are
think
the
you're
yeah.
lowest
right.
chopping block.
Critically, maybe commercially too, because this came out the same summer as Batman.
Yes,
Batman,
yeah,
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Like 19,
it,
yeah. I mean,
it gets shit on
we
a
were talking
lot,
about
but
1982 being a
yeah,
big year. 1989 was a pretty big year as well.
Mm-hmm.
right. Maybe maybe we'll do the summer of '89 next
Yeah,
year. Next
because yeah,
summer.
we had Batman '89, we had Indiana Jones,
Honey,
um,
I Shrunk the Kids.
Honey, I Shrunk the
Oh,
Kids. I think Lethal Weapon 2 came out that
Yeah,
year
Lethal
too.
Weapon
Yeah.
2 came out that
mhm.
summer. Yeah, those are
Uh,
the
Dick Tracy was
popular.
90, wasn't it?
Yeah, Dick Tracy's
Yeah.
90.
90.
Yeah, Batman does this weird thing. Instead of them like adapting more DC comics, they're like, well, I guess people like these pulpy detective comic book characters.
And let's go campier with it. And you're like, I
Yeah.
don't know if that was what people
Well,
want.
not only that, it's like the Superman franchise was kind of out. Christopher Reeve was done with it.
Right.
But I think Star Trek does what so much sci-fi, fantasy, horror does. They bring up topical and cultural things that are going on in our right now.
Yes. Yeah.
And they make it to where you don't feel like you're getting a political speech or being getting a lectured about something because it's within this grandiose story.
There was some controversy recently with Strange New Worlds showing footage from January 6th, but what's kind of funny about that is I did notice that it seemed to only, because there are people in my family even that are, I don't want to get too political here, but I would consider myself, liberal, and they're more conservative. But they didn't have anything to say about that scene. I mean, they could say like objectively, yes, that was bad.
I will say this because he doesn't listen, but my uncle, who got me into Star Trek at such a young age, is very conservative, very
conservative is a good descriptor.
Conservative. The last 4 years was his jam. I'll just put it to you that way.
He's not into QAnon, is he?
No, thank God. But he is. Let's just say we're behind the pine curtain. He's East Texas conservative.
Yeah.
But he's been loving every episode of Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here wondering, like, so are you just watching it for the pew pew, or are you getting the messages? Like, they even touched on a COVID issue with
yes.
and stuff with the light episode where they were soaking, they needed the energy and stuff. That had a very COVID low underlying COVID message to me. Just like several other episodes, I've caught things, and I'm like, "Wow, this is what a great way to work this in."
I need to start watching the new Star Trek.
Strange New Worlds is the best of the new Treks, in my opinion.
You'll absolutely love it. I'm telling you.
They're all pretty good. I don't hate any of them. And people say, when did Star Trek get woke? Well, 1966.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's part of the deal. And like, if there's some line that you're worried they're gonna cross over, they definitely will. So it's like, right. I think a lot of the fans that say that when the movie came out in the 60s, they were more open-minded because they were younger. So they were probably like, oh, well, yeah, it's touching on that, but I'm okay with that. And then as they get older and they get more like set in their ways, then they kind of can see in the newer ones the political message is clearer, maybe. I don't know. Like, why were they okay with that, but not this? I really don't know. But yeah, it's always been the same message. And the entire concept of Starfleet and, the concept of inclusion and everything about it is very... it's on one side of the spectrum.
One episode that stands out and that I've used in current, I don't want to say it wasn't really an argument. Passionate discussion. But it was an episode of TNG where Riker falls in love with an androgynous alien.
I know which one you're talking about.
They're both male and female. Yeah. And that was the whole episode. And I'm kind of like, man, who could not see that?
Yeah, like who doesn't put two and two together? Like they picked the most.
I'm pretty sure Riker would be pansexual anyways. I'm sure he's just like whoever's down to clown with Riker. He's open.
Since we're going there, I would heartily suggest there's this Star Trek YouTuber. She goes by Jessie Gender, and she's been doing.
We watch her.
She does this whole. She's been doing this series like Sex and Star Trek. She's only on the second installment, but like the first one was 3.5 hours, and this new one was like 5.5 hours long.
Man.
Yeah, she has a lot to say. The first one was mainly, yeah, Star Trek has always been horny.
I mean,
Strange New
Captain
Worlds
Kirk,
is
right?
definitely, I think,
Yeah.
horny. Like,
Yeah, but this one is more was more about a lot of the women and the sexual harassment they basically had to deal with throughout next gen. Gates McFadden being fired for speaking her mind and
wow.
being replaced by Pulaski, and then they had to bring
Right.
her. Then they brought her back.
Forgot that all that happened.
Yeah, it's
It was a mess behind the scenes. Like on a production level, especially with up until the point Roddenberry died, um, it it was a mess. There's a documentary called was it Trouble on the Bridge? It may be called Trouble on the Bridge, but it's hosted by William Shatner. But they go into all the detail, all the infighting with the production of the Next Generation and the difficulties they had with Roddenberry and the way he wanted things done, and how stubborn he was, and
Yeah.
lots of backstab. Just very, very interesting.
It took them a minute before they found their footing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
season 1 is a bit rough.
It
It's-
is
it's-
rough. So when
it's
people
called-
say they want to start TNG, I'm always like, well,
start at season 3.
yeah.
Season 3 is well, I would say season 4, but season 3 is when it really started getting good. The season finale, Best of Both Worlds, that was
yes.
what
Oh,
solidified
God.
TNG for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was of epic proportions back then.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to Wrath of Khan, it is the gold standard as far as Star Trek movies go. Several people have tried and failed to replicate its impact, but it just goes to show how impactful it really was. So, yes, um, say this is what makes Star Trek Star Trek.
Right. And
Yeah.
before we start to go ahead and close it on out, Cody, hang on just a second. One show that we have not brought up really a whole lot, and that's Enterprise. And I am shameful. I am not ashamed. I love that show.
Actually, I'm not ashamed. I love that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be ashamed of the things you like unless
Yeah.
you know there's
Yeah.
problematic things in them.
Yeah,
That show came out in 01, like the year I graduated, and like I know there was other Star Trek on TV, but I don't know, this one felt it was new, as exciting, and I don't know, it was different, so it hit me at that right time, and I've got a soft spot for Enterprise.
I will admit I have not watched Enterprise. I
Yeah, I've
It's
seen very little of it. If
The-
I'm
the
honest.
first-
I need to watch almost all of those iterations after Next Gen. I've only seen episodes here and there of those series.
they're fun. They're fun. If you can dedicate and
A
you know,
year of
just
my life, probably, right?
get a couple. Oh yeah, there's like over 800 hours, I think, of content.
I just
Yeah.
need to do it though.
and let's not
at some
forget the
point.
animated series.
Yep, even the animated series. But
Yeah, I haven't watched any of that.
anyway, guys, if you anything else on the Wrath of Khan before we kind of wind down, because I know
I
I
think we
could,
said
I
all
could keep
we-
talking for another hour or so just about Star
Same.
We
Trek.
could
in
just
general,
Star
but-
Trek talk. I think it deserves all its praise. I think it is the gold standard, not just of the franchise, but of just sci-fi film in general. I think you're probably not going to get a better performance out of William Shatner in his entire career.
Oh yeah,
I think Khan is one of the greatest on-screen villains, and it's amazing what Meyer did with probably was not considered I don't know how the episode is considered before this movie came out, but it was like a one-off, right? It was a one-off episode.
Very much.
Yeah,
so.
but it was one of the better episodes.
He wasn't a recurring villain, right? He was just one villain, and they brought so much emotion and gravitas to really just, Moby Dick in space and made it iconic.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess because a friend of Lisa said it, I guess somebody on Twitter, somebody's got to yell Khan, right? Before we end.
Yeah. Not me. I'm not the acting type, but if one of you wants to take the mantle, go for it. Good job.
Well,
sorry for
Isn't that cathartic to get to just shout that? Just go outside and shout your nemesis's name and see how it makes you feel.
I don't know if I have a nemesis.
Me neither.
Just go outside and scream something like capitalism or,
patriarchy.
What are you?
I shall leave you as you left me, as you left her, marooned for all eternity in the center of a dead planet. Buried alive. Buried alive.
Nice.
The official Khan.
Thank you. And that was Palmer. Thank you for that suggestion, Palmer.
Yes.
But Ricardo's performance, again, bravo. Excellent. Just badass villain. He reminds me, because we just watched Hannibal. Like, we just watched Hannibal for Sunday's podcast. And
Hannibal.
He does put off some, like, maybe some
Mads
Hannibal
Mikkelsen, I think is his name.
Maybe so.
Well, that's who plays him in the TV show, which he's great.
Yeah, he's great, but it has probably one of the worst catchphrases of all time. This is my design.
Oh, I was fixing to say a nice Chianti and fava beans.
No, which is also funny because Brian Fuller, the showrunner for Hannibal, he got his start on Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And he was working on Discovery, and I don't know why he left the show. But he started developing Discovery before he left.
That's
weird. Anyway, I think we said all we wanted to say.
Nick, Lisa, thank you so much for
yes.
Yeah,
for sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, you're welcome anytime you want to be on.
As always.
Yeah. So let's see. Excuse me, guys. Cody, what are we doing next week?
Well, next week we're going to be talking about the movie that pretty much ruled the box office for the rest of the summer of '82. We're talking Steven Spielberg's masterpiece, E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
Ooh.
Oh boy, tear fest for me, man. I love it though.
Yeah,
so, and kind of going back to Poltergeist too, because we were talking heavily about the parallels because Spielberg was producer on Poltergeist, and he was directing E.T. and was it a fan theory that all the kids went to school together or lived in the same housing suburb?
That was my theory too. They were all friends, and they're all about the same age. They're all friends in school. What was his name? Elliot and Robbie. Thank you. Yeah, Elliot and Robbie. They both love Star Wars. Their rooms are both littered in Star Wars, and maybe Elliot's older brother is trying to take all
Mac on the daughter.
Mac on the daughter from Poltergeist. Headcanon theory, but it's cool. But they did film in the same neighborhood, so.
Oh, nice.
At the same time.
Probably save money.
Yeah, same time, same area. So at the same time. So, but guys, thank you so much. next week is E.T. and Sunday we are also talking Hannibal.
Well, we are, but not on Sunday. I had to. The guest wanted to reschedule, but we will be talking Hannibal soon.
Okay.
All right.
All
Hey,
right.
that works.
Well, as always, a pleasure, you guys.
Yes.
Those you can find me on Twitter, Mr. My handle is on the little thing right there, Mr. Afro1.
Cool.
And I'll be looking forward to the next discussion.
Lisa, do you want to plug your show while you're with us?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And my handles are on Twitter, it's at ILTM Podcast. On Instagram, it's I Love That Movie Podcast. And anywhere you listen to podcasts, just search I Love That Movie and you'll find me.
All right. It's really nice meeting you, Lisa.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Nick. I just added you on Twitter. That was a good idea to put your @ on there. I need to do that next time.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Nick, Lisa, thank you so much for joining. If you guys like Star Trek and for some reason you haven't seen this movie, go watch it. And if you want to watch along while we're doing this series, please go ahead. Most of these are some iconic, great movies we're talking about. And so
also, I'm sorry, Cody. One more thing. If there is a movie that you don't have that you want to watch, let me know. I can StreamYard movies and we can watch as a group. Or I love watching movies with people and discussing. So if there's something you want to see or you want to watch with someone, I'll do it. So let me know and we'll set something up.
We should make a reaction video for.
We should. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we should. That'd be pretty cool.
You want to?
All right, guys.
All right. Well, everybody stay cool and hydrated and don't go outside unless you have to because it's going to be over 100 degrees today.
Yeah, we're in an excessive heat advisory area. So
until 7 o'clock tonight.
Yes, same.
Actually, I think my area is extended because we're still going to be in triple digits like all through next week. So,
yikes.
Yeah. I have been putting my car through the wash every day, hoping it would rain. I've been doing that all through June.
Well, thank you guys again. Nick, thank you for suggesting this series. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you guys on.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And just like Lord of the Rings, we've said bye 5 times.
Yes. our goodbyes are long.
Yeah.
Means you
like
had a good
Star
time.
Trek franchise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Everybody enjoy the rest of their weekend.
Starting to sound like the Kiss farewell tour.
Say bye, Tina. Bye, Tina.
Bye.